Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin.
Nova Calloway stared at the spreadsheet on her computer screen, satisfaction warming her chest as she reviewed her financial progress. At 28, she'd built more stability than most people her age could dream of. Her apartment wasn't fancy, a one-bedroom in a decent Columbus neighborhood, but it was hers. No roommates, no drama, just the way she liked it. The notification from her investment app made her smile. Another dividend payment had cleared. Small, but it was part of the bigger picture she'd been assembling for years. Nova closed her laptop and stretched, glancing at the clock. Almost midnight. Another late night of extra work, but worth every minute. Unlike the rest of her family, Nova understood something fundamental. No one was going to hand her anything. If she wanted security, she had to build it herself, brick by painful brick. Growing up with Valerie and Marshall Calloway had taught her that lesson early. Their household operated on a strange economy of manipulation, where love was conditional and money was power. Her younger sister Camilla had chosen a different path, playing into their parents' games, becoming the perfect reflection of their worst traits. But Nova had refused. She remembered being 16, working her first job at a grocery store while Camilla lounged by their parents' pool, accepting cash handouts for simply existing. "You don't have to work, Nova," her mother had told her once, voice dripping with disdain. "It looks common." Common. As if there was something shameful about earning your way. Nova shook the memory away as she prepared for bed. Those days were behind her. She'd put herself through college, working 2, sometimes 3 jobs. She'd started investing small amounts as soon as she could. And now, at 28, she had a solid emergency fund, a growing investment portfolio, and an impressive credit score that had earned her a high-limit card she kept for emergencies and strategic purchases. And none of her family knew about it. Nova had made sure of that. Her phone buzzed as she brushed her teeth. Her mother's name flashed on the screen. Nova almost ignored it. Their conversations were rarely pleasant, but something made her answer. "Hello, Nova." Her mother's voice came through too loud, slightly slurred. "My independent little girl." There was an edge to Valerie's tone that immediately put Nova on alert. "What do you want, Mom? It's late." "Oh, I'm just calling with some interesting news." Valerie's voice dropped to a stage whisper. "We know about your little secret." Nova froze, toothbrush halfway to her mouth. "What are you talking about?" "Your fancy credit card, honey." Valerie wasn't whispering anymore. She was laughing, cackling, actually. "Oh, honey, you'll love this. We maxed out your card. Came in real handy. Thought you could hide money from us? Consider this your little punishment." The line went dead before Nova could respond. She stood perfectly still for a moment, then scrambled for her laptop. With trembling fingers, she logged into her banking app. Her credit card balance, usually hovering near zero, now showed $50,000. $50,000 in charges. Her stomach twisted as she scrolled through the transactions. The Ritz-Carlton in Miami, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, a yacht rental, catering services for a private party, all under Camilla's name, that Nova's vision blurred with rage. The careful wall she'd built between herself and her family's toxicity crumbled in an instant. They'd found her card somehow. They'd stolen from her, and they were laughing about it. She grabbed her keys and her phone. Her family lived 20 minutes away, in the sprawling house where she'd grown up. The house she'd escaped from the moment she turned 18. She hadn't been back in months, but tonight they would see her. Tonight they would answer for what they'd done. The drive passed in a blur of streetlights and fury. Nova rehearsed what she would say, how she would confront them, how she would make them understand the magnitude of their betrayal. But as she pulled into the circular driveway of her parents' colonial-style home, she knew no words would penetrate their entitlement. She didn't bother knocking. Her old key still worked, of course it did. They'd never bothered to change the locks. Why would they? In their minds, She would always come crawling back eventually. The house was lit up, music drifting from the back patio. Nova followed the sound, her steps echoing on the marble floors her mother had insisted on during the last renovation. Nothing but the best for Valerie Calloway, even if it meant draining her husband's business accounts. She found them on the patio. Her father lounged in his favorite recliner, tumbler of whiskey in hand. Her mother and sister sat at the glass table, surrounded by shopping bags. All three looked up when Nova appeared in the doorway. "Well, well," Marshall Calloway said, his voice carrying the same slur as his wife's had on the phone. "Look who's here. Our daughter, the financial genius." Nova ignored him, focusing on Camilla, who wore a smug smile, and Nova noted with mounting rage a dress she recognized from the credit card charges. For $1,000 of her money, draped over her sister's bony shoulders. "What the hell did you do?" Nova demanded, stepping closer to the table. Camilla sighed dramatically, setting down her wine glass. "Relax, sis. You weren't using it anyway. That was my money. Money I worked for. How did you even find my card?" Valerie laughed, the sound grating like broken glass. "You really should be more careful with your mail, darling. Leaving a statement at your old address? Careless." Nova remembered now. She'd updated her address everywhere except with that one card, the card she rarely used, kept for emergencies. A single oversight had cost her $50,000. "I'm calling the police," Nova said, pulling out her phone. "This is theft." Marshall stood up, suddenly less amused. "You wouldn't dare. We're family." "Family doesn't steal from each other," Nova shot back. "Family shares," Valerie countered, her smile never wavering. "Besides, who do you think the police will believe? Us, with our standing in this community? Or you, the bitter daughter who's always resented her more successful family?" Camilla stood and brushed imaginary dust from her stolen dress. "Face it, Nova. You always act like you're better than us, with your independence and your budgeting." She spat the word like an insult. "But the truth is, you're just sad and alone while the rest of us enjoy life." Marshall chuckled from his recliner, swirling his whiskey. "You always act so high and mighty. Consider this payback for being a selfish daughter." Nova felt something inside her snap. A lifetime of watching her family take and take and take, of maintaining her distance to protect herself, of building her life from nothing while they squandered everything, it all crystallized into a cold, hard resolve. "You have no idea what you've just done," she said quietly. "No idea at all." Valerie waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, spare us the dramatics. You'll get over it." But Nova wasn't listening anymore. She was already turning away, already planning. If they wanted to play games, she would show them what it meant to lose. She left without another word, their mocking laughter following her through the house. As she got into her car, Nova's mind was already racing with possibilities. She was done being their ATM, done being the responsible one they could exploit. They had crossed a line, and now they would learn exactly what she was capable of. The game had begun, and Nova intended to win. Nova barely slept that night. By dawn, she had several plans. Actually, each more devastating than the last. Her family had made a critical error. They'd underestimated her. Again, her first call was to her bank. As the fraud department representative listened to her explanation, Nova kept her voice steady and professional. Years of documentation helped. Nova had always been meticulous with her records. "Ms. Calloway, I see the charges were made in Miami, but our records show you've been in Columbus this entire time," the representative said. "That's correct. I've never authorized my family to use my card. I can provide you with my work schedule, local purchases on my debit card, and building security logs that prove I was in Ohio when these charges were made in Florida." The fraud claim was just the beginning. By noon, Nova had closed every account her family might possibly have access to. She'd changed all her passwords, set up two-factor authentication, and requested a credit freeze. The fortress she was building around her finances would be impenetrable, but that was just defense. Nova wanted to attack. She opened her laptop and navigated to her mother's social media accounts. Valerie Calloway lived for the approval of her social circle, wealthy Columbus, wives who measured their worth in designer labels and charity gala invitations. Nova had observed their dynamics for years, noting the petty jealousies and tenuous alliances. With calculated precision, Nova crafted a message to Eleanor Winters, the queen bee of her mother's social circle and a notorious gossip. Nova had maintained a cordial relationship with Eleanor over the years, mostly to keep tabs on her family's activities. "Eleanor, I'm concerned about my parents' financial situation. Mom mentioned they're having to downsize investments, and Dad's been asking around for loans. I know they'd hate for this to get out, but I'm worried they're in over their heads with debt. Please keep this between us." She hit send and imagined the wildfire that would spread through her mother's social circle. Columbus high society couldn't abide financial instability. It threatened their fragile ecosystem of wealth and appearances. Next, Nova turned her attention to Camilla. Her sister's Instagram was a carefully curated showcase of luxury and excess. Posts from Miami featured Camilla on a yacht, clinking champagne glasses with friends, lounging in VIP sections of exclusive clubs, all funded by Nova's stolen money. But there was something odd about several photos, a man partially cropped out, his hand visible on Camilla's waist. Nova enlarged the images, studying the expensive watch, the wedding ring, a married man. How typically Camilla, IT took only an hour of searching to identify him. Robert Keller, CEO of a regional insurance company, married to his college sweetheart, father of 3, and apparently funding Camilla's adventures on the side. Nova found his wife's contact information through the company's charity foundation website. The evidence was easy to compile. Screenshots of Camilla's posts with timestamps matching Robert's business trips, hotel receipts that Camilla had carelessly posted about, photos where his watch or profile was visible. Nova created an anonymous email account and sent it all to Mrs. Keller and several board members of Keller's company. I thought you should know. Your husband has been spending company time and possibly resources with a woman named Camilla Calloway. The final step of this phase was the most direct. Nova reported the fraud to the credit card company, providing all her documentation. By the time she finished her call, the charges were officially flagged for investigation, which meant Valerie, Marshall, and Camilla would be required to pay back every penny with interest. As she closed her laptop, Nova felt a strange calm. The first counterstrikes had been launched. Now she would watch as they found their targets. 2 days later, her phone rang. Camilla's name flashed on the screen. Nova answered, but said nothing. "Nova? Are you there?" Camilla's voice lacked its usual smugness. Instead, she sounded frantic. "I need to talk to you. Something's happening, and I don't understand why." "What's wrong, Camilla?" "Yacht spring a leak." "This isn't funny. Robert cut me off. Just like that. He says someone sent his wife pictures of us together. His board members too. He thinks I did it to blackmail him." Nova allowed herself a small smile. "That's unfortunate. He was paying for everything, Nova. The apartment in Miami, the car, everything. And now he's gone, and his wife is threatening to sue me. And I don't know what to do." "Maybe try getting a job," Nova suggested coolly. "I hear earning your own money is very fulfilling." Camilla's voice turned bitter. "I should have known you wouldn't help. You've always been jealous of me." "Jealous?" Nova almost laughed. "Of what exactly? Your inability to support yourself? Your dependence on others?" "No, Camilla. I've never been jealous of you. I've pitied you." "You think you're so perfect," Camilla hissed. "But you have no idea what Mom and Dad are saying about you. They think you've been hiding money from them for years, that you owe them." Nova's strategy was working perfectly. "Is that so? And what do you think, Camilla? Do you think I owe you for something?" There was a pause on the line. "I think you should help your family when they need it." "That's interesting. considering none of you helped me when I needed it. Remember when I was working 3 jobs to pay for college? When I got sick and couldn't afford medication? When my car broke down and I had to walk to work in the snow because none of you would pick up my calls? Camilla had no answer for that. Do you know what the bank told me, Camilla? They said the fraud investigation might involve criminal charges. Felony charges. What? No, that's not our family. We had permission. Did you? Do you have that in writing? Because I have plenty of evidence that I never authorized any of you to use my card. You can't do this to us, Camilla whispered. I'm not doing anything to you. You did this to yourselves. Nova ended the call, satisfaction flowing through her veins like a drug. The next week brought more developments. Valerie called twice, each voicemail more desperate than the last. Apparently, Eleanor Winters had not kept Nova's concerns to herself. Several invitations to upcoming events had been quietly rescinded. Friends were suddenly too busy for lunch. The social freeze-out had begun. Marshall's business partners were distancing themselves too. Nova had made sure to mention her father's financial troubles to a key investor she'd met at a networking event. The whispers of instability spread quickly in business circles where reputation was everything. Meanwhile, the credit card company's investigation concluded exactly as Nova had predicted. The charges were officially deemed fraudulent, which meant her family was on the hook for $50,000 money they had already spent on fleeting luxuries. Nova tracked their downfall through social media and mutual connections. Her parents' credit score plummeted as they missed payments. Camilla was forced to return to Columbus, having lost her Miami apartment when Robert Keller cut her off. The designer clothes and accessories they'd purchased with Nova's money weren't worth a fraction of what they'd paid once the return period had passed. One evening, Nova received an unexpected visitor. Her apartment buzzer rang, and the building's security camera showed Camilla waiting at the entrance, looking nothing like her usual polished self. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her face free of makeup, her clothes simple jeans and a sweater instead of designer labels. Nova almost didn't let her in. But curiosity won out. Camilla sat stiffly on Nova's couch, eyes darting around the modest apartment. "This is nice," she said, clearly struggling to find something complimentary to say. "What do you want, Camilla?" Camilla twisted her hands in her lap. "Things are bad, Nova. Really bad. The bank is threatening to foreclose on the house. Dad's business is struggling because everyone thinks he's going bankrupt. Mom's friends won't even talk to her anymore." She looked up, eyes pleading. "We need help." Nova raised an eyebrow. "And you came to me? After what you did?" "We're still family," Camilla insisted. "And families forgive each other." "Is that what Mom and Dad told you to say?" Camilla's silence was answer enough. "Let me be very clear," Nova said, leaning forward. "I don't owe you or them anything. Not money, not forgiveness, not a second chance. You chose to steal from me. You chose to laugh about it. Now you're choosing to live with the consequences. But where are we supposed to go if we lose the house?" Nova shrugged. "Where do people without money usually go, Camilla? They downsize. They get jobs. They make sacrifices. Welcome to the real world." Tears welled in Camilla's eyes. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Seeing us suffer?" "I'm not enjoying your suffering," Nova replied truthfully. "I'm enjoying justice. There's a difference." "Mom was right about you," Camilla said, standing up. "You're cold. You don't know how to love." Nova laughed, the sound harsh even to her own ears. "Love? Is that what you call what our family does? Using each other, manipulating each other, stealing from each other? If that's love, then you're right. I don't know how to love, and I'm grateful for that." After Camilla left, Nova poured herself a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the city lights. Her revenge was unfolding perfectly. Her family was experiencing, for the first time, what it meant to face consequences, what it meant to lose everything. But Nova wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The final phase of her plan was the most intricate and the most devastating. She would give her family exactly what they always wanted, an opportunity to get rich quick. And in doing so, she would deliver the killing blow to their already crumbling lives. Nova opened her laptop and began to work. Nova's laptop screen glowed in the darkness of her apartment as she put the finishing touches on her masterpiece. The website looked professionally designed, featuring sleek graphics and testimonials from satisfied investors. Meridian Capital Partners didn't exist. Of course, it was a shell, a facade, a trap designed specifically for the Callaways. The investment opportunity she'd crafted was tailored perfectly to appeal to her parents' greed. Exclusive access to a pre-IPO tech startup, promising returns of 300% or more within 6 months. The kind of opportunity that desperate, financially illiterate people with delusions of grandeur couldn't resist. Nova had spent weeks setting up the infrastructure, a professional domain name, a temporary office space rented in a prestigious building, business cards and brochures printed with a fake name and credentials, a prepaid phone with a Columbus area code. She'd even hired a freelance voice actor to record a convincing voicemail greeting. The anonymous tip would come from a friend who had heard about the Callaways' financial troubles and wanted to help. The friend couldn't invest more himself. He'd already maxed out his allocation. But for the Callaways, he could make an exception. Nova knew her parents well enough to predict their reactions. They would jump at the chance to reclaim their lifestyle, to prove to their social circle that their financial troubles had been temporary. They would scrape together whatever they had left, liquidating assets, borrowing from whatever friends hadn't abandoned them yet, and pour it all into this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. She sent the email from a generic account, making sure to include just enough exclusive-sounding details to hook them. Then she waited. The response came faster than she expected. Within 24 hours, her father had called the number she'd provided, leaving a message practically begging for more information. Nova had the voice actor return the call, scheduling a meeting at the temporary office space for the following week. On the day of the meeting, Nova arrived early, disguising herself with a dark wig, glasses, and an outfit that made her look like an administrative assistant rather than the mastermind behind the operation. She watched from an adjacent coffee shop as her parents arrived, dressed in what remained of their finery, clearly trying to project an image of success despite their circumstances. The investment advisor, another actor Nova had hired, met with them for over an hour. When they emerged, their expressions told Nova everything she needed to know. They looked hopeful, energized, rejuvenated by the prospect of financial salvation. Over the next 2 weeks, Nova tracked their preparations. They sold their remaining assets, the vacation property in Michigan, Valerie's jewelry collection, Marshall's prized vintage car. They withdrew the last of their retirement savings, incurring massive penalties. They borrowed from Marshall's brother, promising to double his money within months. All told, they managed to scrape together just over $200,000, everything they had left in the world, plus money they didn't have. When the wire transfer cleared into the offshore account Nova had established, she felt a moment of pure, crystalline satisfaction. Then she dismantled everything. The website disappeared. The temporary office was vacated. The phone number was disconnected. Meridian Capital Partners vanished as if it had never existed, taking the Callaways' last hope with it. 3 days later, Nova's phone rang. Her mother's number. She contemplated letting it go to voicemail, but decided against it. This was a moment she wanted to experience in real time. "Hello, Nova." Valerie's voice was barely recognizable, broken, hoarse, as if she'd been crying for days. "Nova, we need your help. Something terrible has happened." "What's wrong, Mom?" Nova asked, injecting just the right amount of concern into her voice. "We've been scammed. All our money, everything we had left, it's gone." Valerie broke down into sobs. "We invested in this company, Meridian Capital, and now they've disappeared. The office is empty. The phone doesn't work. The website is gone. We've lost everything." Nova allowed a moment of silence before responding. "That's awful. Have you contacted the police? Of course we have. Valerie snapped, momentarily reverting to her old self before desperation took over again. But they said it might be impossible to trace. The money went overseas. And even if they find who did it, we might never get our money back. I'm sorry to hear that, Nova said, and she was surprised to realize she meant it. Not because she regretted what she'd done, but because she was sorry it had come to this. Sorry that her family had never been capable of being anything other than what they were. Selfish, greedy, and cruel. Nova, please. We have nothing left. The bank is foreclosing on the house. We'll be homeless by the end of the month. We need you. You're our only hope. This was the moment Nova had been waiting for her family, on their knees, begging for rescue. The same family that had mocked her work ethic, stolen from her, laughed at her distress. I wish I could help, Mom, but I recently had a major financial setback myself. Someone stole $50,000 from me, remember? I'm still recovering from that. But that was different. That was we're talking about our home, Nova. Where will we live? I don't know, Mom. Where did you suggest I live when I was 18 and couldn't afford college housing? Oh, that's right, you said it wasn't your problem. Valerie's voice hardened. So this is revenge? You're punishing us? No, Mom. This is reality. The reality that actions have consequences. The reality that you can't take and take and take forever without eventually paying a price. Your father was right about you, Valerie hissed through tears. You're heartless, cold, incapable of love. Maybe I am, Nova admitted. But if that's true, who made me that way? Who taught me that love is conditional? That family means using each other? That was your lesson, Mom. I just learned it too well. She ended the call and blocked her mother's number, then her father's, then Camilla's. One by one, she severed the last connections to the people who had tried to bleed her dry. But Nova wasn't quite finished yet. The final move in her game was perhaps the most subtle and the most devastating. Using another anonymous account, she sent emails to her parents' remaining social connections, to Marshall's business associates, to Camilla's friends. The emails contained records of the Callaways' desperate attempts to recover their losses through the Meridian scam, as it was now being called in certain circles. Evidence of their gullibility, their financial incompetence, their pathetic fall from grace. The last vestiges of their reputation crumbled. The few doors that might have remained open to them slammed shut. They were not just broke now, they were laughingstocks, cautionary tales, social pariahs. 2 months later, Nova saw Camilla working as a cashier at a grocery store across town, the same chain where Nova had worked her first job as a teenager. The irony wasn't lost on her. Camilla looked up as Nova approached the register, her eyes widening in recognition, then narrowing in hatred. Are you here to gloat? Camilla asked, scanning Nova's items without making eye contact. No, Nova replied honestly. I'm here to buy groceries. Well, while you're here, you should know that Mom and Dad are living in a 1-bedroom apartment in the worst part of town. Dad's working as a night security guard. Mom's on antidepressants. They can barely afford food. Camilla's voice cracked slightly. Are you happy now? Nova considered the question seriously. Was she happy? The rage that had fueled her revenge had burned itself out, leaving behind a strange emptiness. Not regret, never that, but something quieter. A sense of completion, perhaps. Of justice served. I'm not happy about their suffering, she said finally, handing Camilla her credit card. But I'm at peace with it. Camilla swiped the card and handed it back with a bitter smile. Please, Nova, I have nothing left. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. Nova looked at her sister, really looked at her. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a polyester uniform. The perfect manicure had been replaced by short, practical nails. The entitled attitude had given way to the humility of someone who had finally learned what it meant to work for a living. You never meant for anything, Camilla, Nova said softly. That's the problem. She collected her groceries and walked away, leaving her sister and her family's destruction behind her. 6 months later, Nova moved to Chicago. She had been offered a promotion that required relocation, and she'd accepted without hesitation. There was nothing keeping her in Columbus anymore. She started a small consulting business on the side, helping people learn the financial literacy skills that had saved her from her family's fate. Sometimes she thought about the Callaways, not with regret, but with a kind of detached curiosity. They had taken everything from her once: her security, her peace of mind, her belief in family. Now they had nothing, and she had everything she'd ever worked for. The symmetry pleased her that Nova's new apartment overlooked Lake Michigan. On clear days, she could see for miles across the water, a vista of possibilities stretching to the horizon. She had furnished the place simply but elegantly, quality pieces that would last, investments rather than indulgences. Just like everything else in her life, her phone rang as she was unpacking the last of her boxes. An unfamiliar Columbus area code. For a moment, she considered ignoring it, but curiosity won out again. "Hello, Nova? It's Dad." Nova's hand tightened on the phone. "How did you get this number?" "It doesn't matter. Listen, I know you don't want to hear from us, but things have gotten worse. Your mother is sick. Cancer. We can't afford the treatments. Please, Nova. Whatever you think of us, she's still your mother." Nova closed her eyes, letting the waves of manipulation wash over her without effect. How many times had they tried to use emotion to control her, to extract what they wanted? This was just the latest attempt, the most desperate one yet. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said, and she was surprised to find she meant it. Not enough to help, but enough to acknowledge the human suffering involved. "I suggest you look into state assistance programs. There are resources for people in your situation." "Our situation?" Marshall's voice hardened. "You put us in this situation. You destroyed us." "No, Dad. You destroyed yourselves. I just made sure you couldn't destroy me too." She ended the call and blocked the number. Then she walked to the window, looking out at the vast lake and the new city that was now her home. Behind her, the past. Before her, a future entirely of her own making. Nova had paid a price for her freedom, the blood price of family ties severed, of mercy withheld, of justice pursued to its bitter end. But as she stood at the threshold of her new life, she knew without a doubt that it had been worth every penny.